Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all enjoying the snacks. I wish I had snacks. I don't have snacks. Um, I'm going to do a talk on design systems, building design systems. And I realized when I started when I suggested this topic, this is a huge topic, and you could actually do a talk just on one element of building a design system for to use for a web app. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of focus on talking about the power of design systems, and then the different elements that you should be considering when building a design system as a good solid foundation for building UI. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is because I've been doing this a lot for the last 10 years. I'm currently the front-end engineer at Swimm, and we're implementing a brand new design system and aligning our UI and the application to be more consistent and more easy to maintain and allow us to deliver features quicker. And prior to coming to Swimm, I've only been here for a few months. I was actually leading the design system team at SNCC, and that was a team of 12 engineers. And I did that I was working on that team I was working at SNCC for about 4 years prior to that. And so for the last decade, everything I've been working on has been around building design systems, building good infrastructure, and building UI for various applications. And one of the things that I find most often when talking about design systems is there tends to be this kind of sense that design systems are just for designers. There's a set of guidelines and design tokens and things, and it's something that lives in Figma, and it's up to the designer to keep things aligned and consistent, and they just pass these designs to engineers, and engineers implement them. The thing I found most successful in building design systems is to not think of them that way. I think of them as more as infrastructure, as part of the overall infrastructure of building a UI. There's something that you build your UI on top of. You use this collection of Lego bricks for building out new features, building more and more complex UIs, but it's all a consistent foundation, and they're multifaceted. So you've got design tokens, you've got icon libraries, you've got component libraries. We tend to refer to what appears inside Figma or whatever design tool you're using as a UI kit. And a design system is actually the culmination of all these things together. And I think sometimes that gets lost in terminology. In fact, one of my favorite things to see when I'm looking at blog posts is Figma versus Storybook, and it's like it's not one or the other; it's both. It's Figma serves one purpose, Storybook serves another, and we'll get to that as well. So I've been working with Vue since it was in alpha, so since it was version 0.1.0. And I've seen it iterate through. I've seen it go through all its iterations and changes and whatnot. And I was thinking about kind of what are the features that have just influenced the way that I think about architecting UI. And they're the ones that, if you're familiar with Vue, you'll probably they're just second nature. And it's not until you start using something other than Vue that you realize that actually these features are really quite special and powerful, and they change the way you think about creating components and architecting UI and putting things together. I was actually working with React earlier on this year, and it's taken me about 6 months to get clean, to be honest with you. So I'm really glad to be working with Vue again. So these are things to really kind of get familiar with and think about how you're going to put things together and where the boundaries of components are, and what the responsibilities are, and also thinking about organization and structure, and and conventions. So I'm a big proponent of kind of keeping all your testing and your related files and everything together in little pod directories for components. And if you're not familiar with it, Vue has a style guide, which is really well done. They do admit that it's a little bit out of date for the composition API. But I think the things that it kind of suggests in terms of it's all broken down into essential, strongly recommended, and it's really worth looking through and kind of taking those that guidance to heart and actually following those conventions. For example, naming your foundational components something like base or app or V or whatever you want to call it, as the documentation suggests, and really sticking to keeping things organized and consistent, because as your design system grows, as your component libraries grow, it's really important for things to be well organized for discoverability, for being able to refactor, being able to do all these things. Give me a sec. And as we know, Vue 3's now been rebuilt in TypeScript. Use TypeScript. Add the lang TS to your script and start typing your components. But also really take advantage of creating your own types and sharing them between your components. So use there are common patterns for the way you should construct components. Size for one, variant for another. Keep these props consistent, and define your sizes as a type, and align those types to your design tokens. We'll get to that. I was going to talk about design tokens before this slide, but we'll get to that. But then using them between all your components, you get all the IntelliSense, you get all the benefits of having those typings in, and you're making your components more stable and flexible and strong. Design tokens. So design tokens, it's not just color. Design tokens should be used for your typography, for your spacing, the gap between components, scale, elevation, kind of shadow for modals and everything else. And it's really important to kind of get these things established early before you start building your individual components, because it's hard to unpick later. It's hard to add these things in later. But also start considering themes. Everybody wants a dark mode. Every product team wants a dark mode at some point. So you start considering themes early on, particularly as you're just starting out building a design system, building component libraries. You don't have to roll a theme out instantly, straight away. You can make your components compatible, capable of supporting themes, and then as your design system gets rolled into your web UI, you can do that little bit of extra effort to actually be able to turn on a thing. This depends, of course, on how you're approaching doing the design system. In my experience, it's been rare for from the word go, a design system to exist. Usually there's been an initial launch, an initial release, and you're now wanting to improve that infrastructure, improve that the way the features are developed, and reduce repetition and actually improve consistency. So design system comes in a little bit later. And so you've got all of that to unpick. You've got all of the existing UI to kind of align with your new design system, and you need to get a good percentage of that done before you can switch on something like a dark mode. But it's something to consider as you're starting to build these things out. And Storybook. So I did mention Storybook a minute ago, but Storybook is a fantastic tool for giving you a sandbox for developing components. And this screenshot's actually of one of the components I've been developing recently for Swimm, adding favorite and recent repo listings. And Storybook is more than just documentation. You can use it for testing interaction, experimenting with your components, but also it feeds into the way you can set up testing as well. And it gives you this isolated environment completely separate from your application, where you can really focus on building components where you're separating logic from presentation, and you can actually build these things out. So this is actually a screenshot of the Storybook instance we've been developing at Swimm over the last few months, and it's growing fast. And more as you build features and you start to build in the repetition, building the repeating patterns, it really starts to come together quite quickly. Testing. So, and as I say, these are just kind of things to touch upon when thinking about building that design system. And these are things that you should be trying to consider. So hopefully you've heard of some of these, and you hopefully be aware of a V-test for unit testing. There's also the powerful testing library for encouraging best practice on how to construct your test, testing what the user sees, not testing the instance, the component instance. But one thing I also really encourage is to start thinking about accessibility. So there is a great package called Axcore, and you can do a basic accessibility test of a component in a very simple way. So you can just run an instance in V-test, run an instance of the component, and run it through the accessibility check, and just get that basic level of accessibility and make sure that it's got the right ARIA tokens and it's formatted in the right way and everything else. Just to give you that initial layer. And accessibility tends to be something that isn't really invested until later. But it's the same as considering dark mode early on. If you start thinking about these things as something you're going to need or want to really have later, you just start putting the pieces in place to give you some level of capability, some level of coverage to be able to fully implement these things later. And also HTML validation. So just making sure that you've got valid markup, and it's when you're working in a component in a component way of working, it's very easy to do something like stick a component in that has a root element of a div, and you're putting it inside a span, which is invalid HTML, or you're putting it inside something that it shouldn't be, or it's a list item that's missing a parent UL. HTML validation, automating your HTML validation can actually help catch those things and keep your markup valid. And then a big extension of this, oops, wrong window, this one, is visual regression testing. Now I'm a big fan of visual regression testing. This is taking a snapshot in the browser of a component or a number of components together, and using that snapshot to test regressions. And there's various ways you can approach this. There's various services you can use. Storybook actually is created by a company called Chromatic, and they have a service where they can do visual regression. There's also another one called Percy. But these are pay-for services that kind of charge by the snapshot. There is a kind of budget approach you can do where you just use GitHub. So you store the snapshots of your components, and you can have multiple for individual components, different interactions, make sure that things behave, visually behave the way that you want. Take visual snapshots, store those in your repo. And if one of those changes, you'll get an image change. It actually gives you a little slider and an onion, kind of some little toggles inside GitHub, which will show you that a snapshot's changed. and you need to be aware of it. So, and you can test in different browsers. You can test in light mode and dark mode to make sure that you're not regressing on your different themes. But these are definitely something to be considering and thinking about. And Storybook can really help with this. So you can run a local instance of Storybook, build a local instance of Storybook, and then use Storybook with Playwright to take snapshots of rendered components in Storybook. So you can get a basic implementation of visual regression testing set up relatively easily. And extending on from all of this, once you've established these patterns and these things that you want to be doing, start thinking about scaffolding and automation scripts. So we have a script for creating new components that automatically creates the view file. It creates a story file and a test file. The test file automatically has the accessibility test. It also automatically has the HTML validation test. They're formatted in the way that we like them to be formatted. It automatically creates classes for the component. It creates them in a pod directory, as I showed earlier. So it gets you, 40% of the way towards getting something going relatively quickly. And this actually, after running this command, I instantly get a working component inside Storybook, which has just got some dummy text in ready for me to just start working, just to show that it all kind of works straight away. And as you start to improve these elements of your system, you can update your scaffolding scripts and your automations to just keep reinforcing these practices as you go. And also, we're probably aware of these ones, but also, consider running style lints, ESLint, Prettier, and type check, because you're going to type everything. You have everything in TypeScript, so make sure you do your type checking. These are just good practice to have in. Keeps everything consistent and helps just maintain that consistency in the code that you're doing. So how do you start? So there's a couple. There's a lot in the industry that's talking about how do I encourage adoption of my design system. Like it's like you're going door to door with something that you're trying to sell. This comes back to my view that your design system should be part of your infrastructure. It should be the thing that you're building on top of, and some of that is a shift of company culture and a shift of kind of planning. Good people to be aligned with is actually the designer. Build a designer or designers. Build a good relationship with the designers. Understand what components they're building in their UI kit, what variants they're adding to their components inside Figma and their UI kit, and try and get ahead of it before those things are needed, so that you can build components into your component library, into your design system in preparation for product teams implementing new features. My ambition at Swimm is, I don't want the engineers to have to write any CSS. They should just have all the building blocks, all the layouts, all the components, all the pieces that they need to be able to deliver features without writing any CSS. If they need to write CSS, there's probably something missing. And also building a good relationship with products and actually understanding what's coming up on the roadmap, and trying to, there's a period where a new feature's decided upon within product, and that goes through to design. The design's coming up with the visuals and the user interaction and everything else. It's kind of when you should be getting involved with improving the design system and adding capabilities to the design system, so that when it gets to the product teams to be able to build the feature, they've got everything they need. They've got the designs, they've got the reasoning behind why they're implementing it, and they've got the building blocks. And this kind of approach is why we're seeing a rise in design system teams. These are also referred to as design engineering teams. And actually, there's a really good book by InVision called the Design Engineering Handbook, and there's a link included there. And this is what this is the team that I run at SNCC. And the design system team, they have a good understanding of design, they have a good understanding of product, and they have a good understanding of engineering, and they kind of sit in the center point of being able to speak with those three groups of people, and be able to anticipate and strategize what's needed to be able to, for everybody to be able to deliver what they need to deliver. Designers want their designs to look the way that they design them, and their experience and expertise. They put a lot of thought into interactions and alignment and placement and the way that things go together, and they want those things to be realized in code and realized in the browser. Engineering teams, most of the time, a lot of engineers don't want to work on front end. They want to just implement the logic and just hook up the UI and it look good. That's what you can provide to them there. And product wants to deliver features fast and consistently, and they want happy customers. This all kind of, in my view, and the way I try to always structure things, ends up coming through the design system. In some way, it touches the design system. And so that's kind of me. That was a lot to kind of fly through, and then I've only just touched on certain things. And as I say, there's little individual things that we could dive into in much more detail, and various examples and stuff. But I wanted to kind of just give this broad overview of design systems, design system teams, component libraries, and how they can really help build better apps. So thank you.
First of all, thank you very much, Ryan. Myself, can you hear us, right?
I can hear you.
Any questions, guys? None, because I have like 72 questions already. Are we ready for those?
Go on then.
Yeah, I actually have one. You mentioned earlier visual regression testing, and you said Storybook, and you said Playwright. So guessing that you will run Playwright on the stories of the components you're creating in Storybook.
Yeah.
And the question is what's your take on a different tool called Chromatic, or I don't know how to pronounce it. It's the parent company of Storybook.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think I mentioned that in the slides. So that's an extra pay for service. They store the snapshots for you. So if you've got the budget to do it, then yeah, that can definitely be a solution. I've not used Chromatic directly. I've used Percy. It does start to get expensive. And particularly as you start doing more and more regression tests, because it doesn't just become the component library, teams start using them for the actual app and the implementations as well. And when you're testing, they charge you per snapshot. So and each browser you're testing, that's an additional snapshot. So if you're testing light and dark mode and then 3 browsers, any one snapshot is probably going to be duplicated 5 times to test the different environments. And then if you multiply that by, several thousand, it does start to get quite expensive. Yeah. So you've got to weigh that up. The other alternatives, you put those snapshots in your Git repo, but then you're bloating your Git repo with images. It's always a judgment call. If you've got the budget to do it, one of these services, yeah, they take a lot of the legwork out, because they're handling the comparisons and the storage and everything else, but you do pay for that. So it's just something to keep in mind.
I think one of the interesting differences between when using Playwright and Chromatic, at least for what I know, and I have very little experience with that, unfortunately, but hopefully one day, is that Chromatic introduces an additional connection to different roles to the full cycle of development process. I mean, Chromatic connects the product managers, connects the designers, and they're working and playing around in the same playground. In a difference where like Playwright is mostly a tool for developers that does whatever it does, and all the additional stuff of how the PM gets a message when something is done, and he can look at it at the sandbox or whatever. So Playwright does not give it out of the box. Like, you need to solve this request if you want that.
So another thing that Storybooks now got much stronger ties with Figma. So there's now a first-party Storybook add-on from Figma, or the other way around. But you're now getting more embedded Figma kind of nodes within Storybooks, so bringing the designer into that environment as well. So it becomes this central hub, particularly if you host your instance of Storybook as well. So you can go in and link, product can go in and play with the component, look at it. Designers can go in, play with the component, look at it. So it becomes this kind of hub for everybody. And yeah, anything that strengthens that is a bonus.
Right. Ryan, thank you very much.
No worries.
One question.
Are your very basic components of the design systems, are they include any logic or non-trivial logic? If they are not including any non-trivial logic, what about, have you thought about creating them as a custom element instead of the Vue components?
So I caught the non-trivial logic bit. So in terms of that, foundational components, base components shouldn't manage states. You should feed state into them. Integration components that actually implement the feature should handle the state, and you pass the any data in. What was the second part of that? Sorry, I couldn't hear from the. What was the second?
Asked if as I understand, the most basic components doesn't include any logic. So have you thought about creating them as a custom element, as a pure HTML custom element instead of Vue components?
I don't really. I mean, that's what are you talking about, web components?
Yeah.
So I haven't really delved into that, but I'm a big fan of Vue. but yeah, I mean, it's an option.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.